Before the gates of the imperial harem opened to the world, before Europe whispered its rumors and the palace scribes dared write the truth, the daughters of the Ottoman Empire lived in a world made of silk and fear. To outsiders, they were the most protected women on earth, wrapped in jewels, guarded by eunuchs, raised in golden rooms perfumed with rosewater and power. But inside those walls, behind the embroidered curtains and quiet fountains, every Ottoman princess carried a terror that had no name. They were terrified of their first wedding night. And that fear did not begin with marriage. It began with destiny. A princess of the Ottoman dynasty was not born for love or companionship or family. She was born as a political weapon. Her body was a treaty. Her marriage was a warning. Her children, if she survived that long, were the empire's future bargaining chips. And the men they married were never chosen for affection. They were chosen for usefulness. A princess's husband was usually a governor who controlled a restless province, a warlord whose loyalty needed binding, a rising noble whose power had to be contained, or a man feared by everyone except the sultan himself. The princess entered marriage carrying the weight of an empire, while the man waiting for her carried the weight of his own ambition. That is why the first wedding night was feared. Not because of what outsiders whispered, but because of what history remembered. Stories of princesses who returned broken, princesses who cried without sound, princesses who begged never to be sent away again. But their fear was deeper than any single night. It began long before. In the imperial harem, the princesses were raised by women who had seen too much. Elder concubines, royal tutors, widowed sultanas. Women who whispered truths behind their hands and trained the girls not in romance, but in survival. You must never anger your husband, they said. You must never let him see your fear. You must never forget your life is not yours. And then came the rituals. When a princess approached marriageable age, the palace quieted around her. Servants spoke softer. Eunuchs watched her more closely. And the elder women began preparing her for the role she did not choose. They washed her in rosewater scented with amber. They braided her hair with gold thread. And while their hands worked, their voices taught her everything she needed to endure. Not to enjoy, not to hope, to endure. If she trembled, they told her to hide it. If she cried, they told her to stop. If she protested, they told her stories of women who protested and were never seen again. In the harem, reality was passed down like a curse. And the darkest truth was this: the princess did not know the man she was about to marry. She had never spoken to him, never seen him without witnesses, never heard his real voice. She only knew what the harem told her. He is brutal. He is ambitious. He fears the sultan and no one else. He will expect loyalty. He will test you. The night before the marriage, she was taken to the room of preparation, a chamber used for centuries, where brides sat on marble cushions and waited in silence as musicians played songs too soft to hear. Some princesses stared at the floor. Others whispered prayers. A few broke down crying, but only when the door was closed and no eunuch could see. The dread had been building for years. Because every princess knew the truth. A husband could not hurt a concubine without risking punishment. But a princess? A princess belonged to the sultan, and the sultan, the caliph of the Ottoman world, did not punish those who disciplined what already belonged to him. That is why they were afraid. Not of romance. Not of intimacy, but of power. What happened after the wedding depended entirely on the man she married. Some husbands were gentle, patient, cautious, but others? Others saw the princess not as a bride, but as a challenge, a symbol of control, a test of dominance, a reminder that by touching her, by breaking her, they touched the throne itself. It was said that the sultan chose certain men because they would never dare betray him after such a marriage. Fear forged loyalty, and the princess was the fire they fed. But the rituals of the first night made everything worse. When a princess arrived at her husband's palace, she was greeted not by warmth, but by ceremony. A long procession, drums, torches, 24 officials carrying gifts. And at the end of that procession, standing like a statue carved from ambition, was the man she had been given to. He didn't bow, he didn't speak, he didn't smile, he simply stared. Not with affection, with evaluation. As if she were livestock, a contract, a form of currency. She was led to the marriage chamber by women from the new household women whose loyalty belonged to her husband. Not her. Their faces were blank, their voices cold. They dressed her in the wedding robe, They removed her jewelry. They braided her hair in the style of the province she would never escape. But the most terrifying moment came when the candles were lit. Not normal candles. 7 candles arranged in a circle, each representing a virtue she was expected to possess: silence, obedience, purity, patience, submission, fertility, honor. If a princess trembled, the women watching her would note it. If she hesitated, they would report it. If she cried, they would whisper it to the husband waiting outside the door. Everything was recorded. Everything was judged. And then the door closed. For the first time in her life, no eunuch protected her. No elder woman guided her. No law shielded her. She was alone, with a man who had been raised to conquer. The Ottomans kept no official record of what happened in those rooms. History, however, preserved the aftermath. Princesses who returned to the palace years later were no longer girls. Nor were they women. They were something else entirely. Some spoke in monotone whispers. Some kept their heads lowered even in the Sultan's presence. Some developed sudden fear of enclosed spaces or locked doors or candlelight. Others refused to speak of their first night at all. It was as if the silence itself was part of the ritual. But the most chilling truth? Even the palace doctors noted something strange. Princesses often returned physically unharmed, but psychologically altered. Something had changed behind their eyes. Something the empire chose not to document. Something the sultans chose not to question. And then, one winter night, the truth broke open. A princess beloved by the palace, gentle, quiet, dutiful, returned home only 3 months after her marriage. In a state so broken the harem women refused to describe it. She did not speak. She did not eat. She woke screaming every hour. And when her mother asked her what happened on her first night, the princess whispered only 5 words. He did not wait long. The room froze. The women understood. The empire buried the story. And the ritual continued for centuries. But there was something else, something even darker that history nearly erased. There existed a second ritual, performed only for princesses of the bloodline. One more terrifying than the first night. A ritual meant to ensure loyalty. A ritual kept hidden even from the palace scribes. A ritual whispered in the harem as the compliance night.
They called it the compliance night, a phrase no historian dared write, a ritual no scribe recorded, a secret the empire carried like a wound stitched shut with silence. Yet every princess knew the name long before she understood its meaning. It did not take place on the wedding night. It came after, sometimes days later. Sometimes weeks, when the husband had already tested her obedience. When the marriage was sealed by custom. When the province began whispering about its new mistress. Only then did the second ritual begin. And unlike the wedding night, this one did not belong to the husband. It belonged to the empire. The Sultan's daughters were not simply brides. They were political weapons, sharpened and controlled. For centuries, sultans learned the same dangerous lesson. A princess who loved too fiercely could betray the throne. And a princess who hated too deeply could destroy it. So the palace created a ritual designed to break devotion before it formed. The compliance night existed to sever the princess from her past and bind her to the empire alone. It began with a letter, delivered without warning, stamped with the imperial seal, signed with the name she feared most, the valid sultan, the mother of the empire. The woman, even the sultan, obeyed in shadows. The letter contained only one sentence: prepare yourself for the night appointed to you. Those words sickened every princess who received them. Those words meant that her life in the new palace was about to change forever. The household shifted immediately. Servants grew quiet. Eunuchs stiffened with formality. The husband himself often avoided her, not out of mercy, but out of fear. For men knew what the ritual demanded of them, and what it meant if they failed. The princess was led to a secluded chamber, far from the wedding room. No incense, no flowers, no embroidered pillows. The walls were bare stone, the floor covered in simple mats. Only one object distinguished the room from a prison, a single high mirror. Wide as a doorway, polished until it reflected every tremble of breath. They told her to sit before it. They told her to wait. Hours passed. And in that silence, the princess felt the empire closing around her like a fist. When the door finally opened, the women who entered were not servants. They were the elder mothers or tired concubines, former royal favorites, widowed sultanas. Women who had lived in the harem longer than any man had lived on the battlefield. Women whose eyes saw everything, yet revealed nothing. They circled the princess without speaking. Their silence was heavier than prayer. Then the eldest stepped forward and asked the first question, always the same. "Whom do you love?" The princess was expected to answer, "My family." But the elder mothers shook their heads. "Whom do you fear?" "The empire." "Still wrong?" "Whom do you obey?" "The sultan." "Almost right." But not fully. The ritual's purpose was simple and brutal, to remove the princess's heart from her chest without shedding a drop of blood. The correct answer, the only answer, was, "I belong to no one."
Until she said those words, the ritual continued. The women surrounded her. They asked the same question again and again, their voices rising and falling like a chant, until the words no longer sounded human. Her mind blurred, her breath shortened. Her lips trembled between truth and survival. Some princesses resisted for hours. Some broke within minutes. But the moment she whispered those 5 words, when she surrendered not her body but her identity, the ritual changed. Because that was when the husband entered. The princess did not turn. She wasn't allowed to. Her eyes remained fixed on the mirror, on the reflection of her fear, on the reflection of the man who now stood behind her like a shadow, ready to swallow her whole. The elder mothers stepped aside. The eunuchs closed the doors. The candles were extinguished one by one until only the faintest glow illuminated the mirror's edge. The husband did not speak. He did not touch her. He only watched. For this ritual was not his, it was hers. And the empire wanted to see whether she could endure. She was made to recount her childhood, not in fond memories but in confessions. Every moment of warmth, every secret dream, every ounce of longing for her mother or sisters. She was forced to strip each memory bare in front of the mirror, until she cried, until she gasped, until she forgot the sound of her own happiness. The husband's role was not to comfort her. It was to remain still, unmoving, unreadable stone, so she understood the truth. He was not her refuge. He never would be. For the empire did not want princesses who sought comfort in their husbands. It wanted princesses who obeyed without attachment, who could influence power without being influenced, who could survive betrayal, isolation, and fear. Once the confessions ended, the mirror ritual began. 2 women lifted the princess's chin toward her own reflection. They whispered, "Look at who you were. Look at who you are. Look at who you can never be again." They told her to describe the girl she saw, and then commanded her to destroy that girl with her words. For some, it took minutes. For others, the night lasted until dawn. Only when she denied her former self did the husband's oath begin. He approached her, stopped a few steps behind her, and spoke a vow every Ottoman man marrying a princess was forced to recite. A vow carved into the empire's shadowed laws. "I may rule you, but I cannot own you. You may fear me, but I cannot break you. You belong to the empire, and I belong to your silence." The vow did not protect her. It warned her, if he harmed her beyond what tradition allowed, the empire would punish him. If she disobeyed him, the empire would punish her. Both were bound. Both were trapped, but only she lived with the weight of the mirror. By the end of the ritual, the princess's voice was gone. Her knees weak, her breaths shallow. Her identity fractured like a mosaic smashed and rearranged by hands older than time. When she was finally taken to her marital chambers for the second time, she no longer walked like a bride. She walked like a ghost. Some princesses who survived the ritual developed strange habits afterward. They refused to look into mirrors. They flinched at candlelight. They avoided silence, filling their rooms with musicians so they wouldn't be alone with their thoughts. And some whispered under the breath of palace doctors, developed an inability to sleep unless someone else was breathing in the room. The empire had changed them. The ritual had achieved its purpose. But the darkest part of the ritual, the part censored from every chronicle, was what happened if a princess resisted. If she refused the chant, if she fought the confession, if she rejected the husband's oath, there was one final stage. A stage only used 8 times in Ottoman history. A stage so feared that elder mothers used it as a warning to keep younger girls in line. It was called the Night of Silence. They rarely spoke of the Night of Silence. Not because they were forbidden to speak, but because the memory itself was unbearable. Only 8 princesses in 600 years ever endured it. 8 daughters of the empire whose wills did not break, whose voices did not surrender, whose spirits refused to bow before ritual or empire. Those 8 forced the palace to reveal the final punishment. The punishment meant not for the body, but for the soul. No princess knew the details beforehand. No harem teacher dared whisper more than a warning. Obey, for if you don't, they will take what you cannot replace. It began when a princess resisted even after hours of ritual. When she refused the chant. When she clung to her memories. When she rejected the husband's oath. The elder mothers would go still, silent, watching, waiting to see whether the princess's defiance was stubbornness or something more dangerous. The empire feared only one kind of woman, a princess who believed her life belonged to her. And when they sensed such a woman, they summoned the final rite. The princess was led not to a room, but to a corridor deep within the palace. A corridor so old it predated the empire itself. Some said it was built by Byzantine architects. Others whispered it was older still, a remnant of Roman foundations. But everyone agreed on one thing. The corridor changed whoever walked through it. The walls were narrow, the air cold. The torches dim, flickering like souls caught between breaths. As the princess walked, the sound of her steps echoed unnaturally. Not one footstep, but 2, as if someone or something walked beside her. At the end of the corridor stood a single wooden door, heavy, unadorned, smelling of centuries. Behind that door lay the room known only to the elder mothers. There were no windows, no decorations, no candles, only darkness. They called it the Chamber of Names. The princess was pushed inside. The door locked behind her. For the first few minutes, there was nothing, no light, no voice, no sound, only the darkness breathing with her. Then the whispering began. Not from outside the door, not from the walls, but from the dark itself. Who are you? Who do you think you are? What makes you believe you belong to yourself? Voices layered upon voices, men and women, young and old, as if 1,000 ancestors spoke in unison. Most princesses broke within minutes. They pounded on the door. They begged, they wept, they promised obedience. But those who refused, those whose spirits remained unbroken, were forced into the second stage. A single sliver of light cut into the room. Not enough to illuminate, just enough to show the outline of the mirror again. But this mirror was different. The wedding night mirror reflected the body. The compliance mirror reflected the fears. This mirror reflected memory. They placed a princess before it, hands bound, eyes forced open. And then the whispers changed. They no longer asked who she was. They told her who she had been. They described her childhood, her first smile, her happiest days, every moment she wished she could return to. They made her watch as her reflection twisted, her childhood self fading, warping, flickering like a ghost burned by shadow. The mirror showed her what she would lose if she continued fighting. Her past, her innocence, her sense of self. The empire offered her one final choice. Surrender your will, or surrender your identity. And that was when even the strongest princesses broke. Some screamed until their voices cracked. Some collapsed. Some whispered the surrender so quietly you could barely hear it through the door. But when the words finally came, "I belong to no one," the ritual ended. Not with warmth, not with comfort, but with silence. The princess was left alone in the dark for the rest of the night, alone with the echo of her memories. Alone with the ghost of the girl she could no longer be. Only when dawn arrived did the door unlock. The elder mothers entered. They helped her stand. They covered her with a cloak. And they guided her out of the darkness. But they never touched her skin. Because the tradition said, a princess who survives the night of silence is no longer someone who can be touched. She had crossed a threshold that separated the daughters of the empire from the daughters of the world. Her husband was waiting outside the corridor. Not as a lover, not as a partner, but as a witness. When he saw her, he did not speak. He bowed a bow deeper than any man of power was expected to make. Because the princess standing before him was no longer fragile. She was forged, a weapon, a ghost, a bride of the empire. From that day on, the princess would move like a shadow in her own palace, soft, controlled, silent. She would speak in half whispers, her gaze always distant, as if she were listening to something no one else could hear. Some husbands treated their wives with respect after this, others with fear. A few avoided them entirely, unable to look into eyes that had witnessed the Chamber of Names and survived. But every princess who endured the ritual shared one trait. They never spoke of it. Not to servants, not to husbands, not to their children. Silence was their final vow. And yet, within the palace walls, in the secret corners of the harem, stories grew like vines. Stories of a princess who emerged with her hair white as frost. Stories of one who walked into the Chamber of Names pregnant and walked out alone. Stories of one who refused to break and never returned. Her room remained sealed for decades, her name erased from imperial scrolls. But the darkest rumor of all was whispered only by those who had served the harem longest, that the Chamber of Names did not break the princess. It consumed the part of her the empire feared the most, hope, for when a princess had no hope, she had no rebellion. When she had no dreams, she had no secrets. When she had no memory of who she once was, she belonged wholly to the throne. That was why Ottoman princesses feared their first wedding night, not because of the man waiting for them, not because of the marriage forced upon them, but because they knew, somewhere beyond the candlelit halls, beyond the silks and gold, beyond the walls that guarded them, a room existed where their name, their past, and their identity could be stripped away without a single bruise. A room where silence was punishment and memory was the price. And for 6 centuries, the empire hid this truth behind veils, behind rituals, behind obedience. Only the daughters knew. Only the daughters remembered. And when they sat beside their own daughters years later, braiding their hair, telling them stories of weddings and destiny and honor, their voices always trembled on the night before the marriage. Because they knew what awaited. Because they had endured the silence. Because the empire did not need chains to break its daughters. It only needed tradition.